Hi, shalom, friends. You know, we're not, the people of the Bible never auditioned for being the favorite. So they're all favorites of us. We study the Bible, we study the Chumash, and we especially give attention to the 12 sons of Jacob, because the Jewish nation comes from the 12 sons of Jacob. We call them the Shavatim. And in fact, the Jewish people are called Bnei Israel, Bnei Yisrael, and Jacob and Israel is the same person. So if I ask you, based on the biblical stories, which one of the 12 children of Jacob, all of them holy, all of them pure, all of them mighty, but which one would you pick as the model? And I think, without a doubt, most of us would pick Joseph. After all, we actually know most about him. So here's a handsome young boy, and though he's orphaned and he's shunned by his family, he turns out to be the wisest of them. As later on he is told by the Pharaoh, there is no one as wise as you in my whole country. And he becomes a viceroy, second in command, and he nourishes and sustains the people of Egypt. And to his own family, he's magnanimous. He gives them property and supports them. I mean, he's righteous, he's virtuous, he's handsome. He has all of the great qualities of leadership. And then you say, well, you know, we should look for bravery and heroism. And we look at Simon and Levi, Shimon and Levi. They're very young, and when they find out that one of the members of their household has been abused, they take their swords and they wage battle to save their sister. So if you're looking for initiative, you're looking for bravery, you're looking for courage, you're looking for family identification, we have another two candidates. Well, maybe we're looking for someone that's like the head of the family. And this head of the family, his name is Reuben. And as the Torah tells us, that when 10 of the brothers ganged up on one of the brothers, and there was a question of whether or not this one brother should be disposed of, the head of the family was quite firm and said, no, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into a pit. Later on, I will save him. So we have so many candidates, and yet when we look at the requirements for the Mashiach, who will be the King of all kings? And who will usher in world peace? It will be the anointed one who comes from the tribe of Judah. He's a descendant of King David who comes from the tribe of Yehudah. So I ask you, look into not the Midrash or the mystical works which are filled with meaning and significance of each child, but look into the story, the way it's in chapter 37 and 38 of the book of Genesis. Where do we see in Judah qualities which are so important, and which basically is an indication of what we're truly looking for in a messianic figure? Well, let me remind you, if there was ever a person in biblical times that should be devastated, it would be Judah. Let me explain why I'm saying that. In the story of the selling of Joseph, the brothers are convinced that Joseph, though he's one of the brothers, is actually a threat to the family. And they're deliberating what's the best way to save the family. And they come up with a solution which is really harsh. The best way to save the family is to get rid of the threat. Let's kill him. The oldest of the children doesn't really disagree that Joseph is a threat, but he cannot countenance that killing a brother. You know, put him in the pit. Let's humiliate him And then, as the Bible clearly says, his thought was he was going to come back and save his brother, and figuring out that in this way that they humiliated him and degraded him, he'll get the message that he should be play by the rules, not to dream of being the head of the family. Who ruins his plans? Judah. There's a group of merchants going, and Yehuda pipes up, and I shouldn't say the word pipes up, he says to his brothers, you know what, let's sell him as a slave. So they sell him as a slave, and for all practical purposes, their brother is lost to them forever. The equivalent of death, and perhaps worse. Reuben comes back and says, where's the lad? And they say, well, basically, we sold him as a slave. We listened to our older brother Yehuda. And Reuven, what am I going to do? And the brothers huddle together, and they say, maybe we overreacted. So let's think of a way of trying to appease our father, who was very attached. So they bring a tunic, and we think your beloved son, our brother, died. And what they were hoping and anticipating was that after mourning his child, he would get consoled. He has 11 other children, and he has grandchildren, he has daughter-in-laws. There's enough to occupy him full time. And yet, the father refuses to be consoled. Now, how do you think the brothers then looked at Yehuda? Reuven was the oldest. He knew that he could have saved Joseph and could have spared the agony and the grief of the father. The other brothers were listening to Yehuda. It seemed so logical at that moment. Let's not kill him, just let's get rid of him. But take a look how it boomeranged. Their beloved father refuses to be comforted. Okay, I would consider that a traumatic experience. And if I were a person in a similar situation where my brothers turned against me and looked at me as the cause of misfortune, and knowing deep down that I caused my father grief, I would sort of retreat into myself. Turn to page, chapter 38. Well, Yehuda is an adult. He wants to start a family. He wants to, maybe I'll add these words, maybe he wanted to start again. So he marries. Obviously, he's going to marry someone that he's attracted to. And he has his first boy. Now, I don't know about you, but when I had my first child, I was delirious with joy. There's a future. I'll have the nachas of seeing my child grow, and I believe firmly that my child will marry and have a child, and it's wonderful. And then he has a second child, and a third child, and things are looking somewhat better. Yes, his brothers are still upset with him, I would assume, and the father's grief is apparent, and Judah knows that he's a major cause of that. But at least he has a beloved wife, he has a family, and now comes the happy day. He finds a virtuous and a beautiful woman who's going to marry his oldest son, and he's anticipating happiness for the future. And what happens? His firstborn dies. Crushing. Me and you probably have met people who their marriage and their life was indelibly changed for the worse when a child dies. The world changes. Well, what happened to my grandchildren that will be coming? You know what? In those days, there was a custom that if it was agreeable, the widow would marry the brother. So she marries the brother. And he dies. Can life get any worse? His own brothers looked down at him, were upset with him. His father is grieving, and he just lost 2 of his children. Can things get worse? Yeah. What happens next? His wife dies. Okay, that's it. Enough. I can't take it anymore. And you know what the Chumash tells us? It's an amazing statement. It says, and Judah was after a time, a long time, he was comforted, and he said, I'm going to start again. And he goes, and he meets a woman, yes, unsavory, and I won't talk about that for now, but basically marries this woman and has 2 children. And not only does he have 2 children, and 2 children that are righteous, but one of them becomes the progenitor of the Messianic line. Of all of the brothers, who is the one that says, I can acknowledge pain, I can acknowledge grief, I know what sorrow is, and life has to continue. Not only does life have to continue, life will continue. And my response to loss is not despair. My response to a great loss is to rebuild. This, my friends, is messianic. This is leadership. And of course, I mentioned this to you because this week we celebrated the teachings and the life and the continuous life of the 7th Rebbe of Chabad. In fact, we could use the expression, he gave us marching orders, and we're marching. Here's a man that was born in 1902, at a time when pogroms was something that was tolerated by the government, perhaps even encouraged. He lived through a World War I where he saw tens of thousands of stragglers and of what do you call it when you people that had to leave their homes. He lived through a World War II. He lived through a Stalin oppression. His entire family closest to him were killed by the Nazis. His father died in exile under Stalin. A person like that, what do you think he might respond? He might respond to retreating into a world within himself. He was a saint and a scholar, and create an enclave, an insulated place where he would impart wisdom and knowledge and be appreciated by people of high caliber. And yet this man, our Rebbe, saw the future. He didn't see despair. He saw a future. When he came to America, he said as follows, you can't tell an American Jew what to do, but you could teach him to do everything. And the American Jew will do everything. He saw goodness where people saw the opposite. He created light instead of wallowing in darkness. And most of all, this man radiated optimism, faith, confidence, and marked improvements. Instead of focusing on the incidents which were dark, he said, look at the bigger picture. We are evolving into a higher and a more noble existence. Our Rebbe, truly a messianic figure. And that's coming from Judah, in spite of all. He creates life, and from that creation, Mashiach comes. And I'd like to end with one more insight about Judah. We find later on that the family is suffering. And it would seem that the only way that the family could stay together intact and healthy is if they travel to Egypt, a foreign land, and bring back food. And the father says, I've already lost one child forever, and a second child is in prison by this Pharaoh in Egypt, and now you want to go again and take my youngest? And Judah says, I take responsibility for him. And later on, as you read the exciting story in the Chumash, the youngest son of Jacob, Benjamin, is accused of a crime. The king says, I will take him as a prisoner, as a slave. You may go home. And Judah says, no, take me. Take me. I cannot bear my father's pain anymore. For a person to sacrifice himself for a fellow brother, for a fellow Jew, this is again messianic. And if there was one person who still teaches us that, it's our Rabbi. So this thought is not meant to be an appreciation of the Rabbi. It's meant to be a challenge to us. We are B'nai Israel. We are the children of Israel. We have a Joseph in us. We have a Reuven in us. We have a Shimon and a Levi in us. We have courage. We have heroism. We have dedication. We have wisdom. We have a Judah, which is dominant. We praise God. We are confident no matter what happens. We have to build, we will build, and we will see the success of that building. Let's hope and pray that very, very soon, imminently, we see a descendant of Judah, the righteous Mashiach. Amen.